All right, so for this week's video assignment, I'm going to present an article that shows a good example of media bias within it. Before I do that, I wanted to address a couple statements I found from the material on Moodle from this week. So I'll start with that. So the first reference I got was from the first video on how the news media influences perceptions around crime. They described it as if it bleeds, it leads. That was about a minute and 30 seconds into that video. Basically, it says that the media loves to sensationalize violent crime stories because it attracts audiences. But it obviously can also steer the public mood to certain chosen directions, depending on what the media is trying to convey to the people watching it. Um, media of all kinds can do this. They can they can tweak. They can have a certain way of displaying the information to fit their opinion, and kind of share that opinion to get people to think a certain way. And it could be based on facts or it could not be. So that was the first reference. The second one was from the article called "The Impact of Media on Public Perception of Crime in the Criminal Justice System." In that article, the piece I took out was, by focusing disproportionately on certain demographics, the media contribute to the criminalization of these groups, further marginalizing them and undermining efforts toward equity and injustice. So that's basically saying that what that basically means is that the media tends to focus on crime stories that are on certain racial and minority groups, which the problem with that is that it not only is causing them to be seen and associated with crime all the more, but it's not really fair. So for this assignment, I chose an old article from 2012. So going back a bit, but basically to give a quick rundown of it. So it involves two gentlemen. One of them is a 17-year-old black teenager by the name of Trayvon Martin. He is killed by a suspected by a person named George Zimmerman, who is suspected to be white. So this ideal that it was a hate crime kind of murder, but there is evidence throughout the article, and that comes out later, that shows that it was not anything to do with, you know, racist motivations. It was strictly self-defense. And the gentleman, George Zimmerman, acted upon his self-defense right and defended himself from the other man, Trayvon Martin, who attacked him. So a line I took from the article that kind of set the tone and the main idea for the article that they want to give out is, here is the quote. So, the family of a 17-year-old African-American boy was shot to death last month in his gated Florida community of a white neighborhood watch captain. Wants to see the captain arrested, the lawyers said on Wednesday. So that was the lawyer of the criminal case stating that. So basically, they on the media, they want people to think that, there's this white man was out to harm this innocent black child, and that's basically the kind of tone that they want people to absorb throughout reading the article. So I'm going to start beginning with going over the 10 questions for the article. So the first one: whose message is this? Who created it and paid for it, and why? So this article was created by Reuters, which is a global news agency and media provider. The funding comes from Thomson Reuters Foundation, which was specifically written by local interest in Orlando, Florida. So that's what I found for question one. And question two: who is the target audience? What is their age, ethnicity, class, profession, interests, all that? So the article was from a more local paper under parent company Reuters, which I mentioned. And this was in Florida. And I think it is targeting a large audience of all Americans around the country, all races, all classes, you name it. But I do feel like this article is trying to provoke those particularly vulnerable to racial conflict suggestions. And because of that, the question, what words or images suggest this? Well, in the article, they say that a 600-pound gorilla in the room is race. Actually, the opening sentence of African American teenager shot to death by a white neighborhood watch captain. So, like I mentioned before, they want the media to think, by getting a message out of this article, that they want to send the message that there was a white man who killed an innocent black child. That's what they want the media to know. So, excuse me. So the text of the message, what we actually see and or hear written or spoken words or photos, drawings, logos, design, music, sounds. So for that question, number 3, there are written words that are used, and some of them are more inflammatory. They definitely suggest guilt of the guilt on the shooter and complete innocence of the victim. And I noticed this in the way they displayed the media. Even was very noticeable in the way they set up the article and displayed. They provided some images, and you could tell that they were biased in those images. So for the next question, question 4, what is the subtext of the message, and what do you think is hidden or understated meaning? So I feel like the subtext of this message is that we got a racist, white adult, grown man who murders a young, innocent African American teenager. I feel like that is the subtext. So for the 5th question, what kind of lifestyle is presented? Is it glamorized, and how? So the back to what I said earlier about the statement. So they describe it as a suburban American life, pretty typical in a neighborhood, and they described it as a gated community. So more, I would take that as like a wealthier area, if I had to guess. And for the 6th question, what values are expressed? Well, common American family values in the victim. They said throughout the article that he died with Skittles in his pocket for his little brother to make him appear, like, no, he was just a good kid, looking out, he even had candy for his, little brother, there's nothing he could do wrong, he's just an innocent child, completely innocent. So, they push it a certain way, and without actually sharing a lot of facts. So those are some examples of that. All right, so for the 7th question, what tools of persuasion are used? Well, so I'd say the language that they use is they presented the victim as completely innocent, and I even think they suggested that he was actually younger than 17, which the facts say that he was 17, but they did kind of describe this. They told the story in a way that made him sound younger than he was 17, to kind of, as a way of making him look more innocent, I suppose. That the end of that kind of leads into the next question, question 8. So for question 8, what positive messages are presented and what negative messages are presented? So the positive one was that Trayvon Martin, the victim, he was a quote unquote good kid. It said that Trayvon described him as a high school junior who wanted to grow up to be a pilot, and the fact that he had Skittles in his pocket for his brother, as a caring, friendly brother. The negative was that Zimmerman was they described him as now Zimmerman was the killer in this case. They described him as a loose cannon neighborhood watchman, mean, angry, criminal white man that's out to hurt the kid. So it described him as Trayvon. So it summarized that as saying Trayvon only has Skittles and Zimmerman has the gun. So the white guy's with the gun out to get him, and Trayvon's just a friendly, neighborly kid out there with Skittles, and just a friendly kid. So question 9: what groups of people does this message empower? What groups does it disempower? How does this serve the media makers' interests? So I'd say the message in the media, at least in the article, it empowers not only to inflame their anger, the people's anger, but the victim's racial minority group. If interest, and it also includes the anger, and it ramps up, and that ultimately benefits the media because the public will consume more news and media. And okay, so most important part of this for number 10, what part of the story is not being told? Well, there is a lot that's not being told, but also how and where could you get more information about the untold stories? So biggest part of the story, which I found out, which I thought was a little crazy, was that Zimmerman, the accused killer, was not actually white. He was Hispanic. His first legal name was George, but they named him as his first legal name was George. They chose that one to make him sound more white, but it was actually pronounced Jorge, which sounds more Hispanic. So he was not a white man, but the media portrayed him as being a white man. To fit, to make it sound more like a racial situation when it wasn't. But I think this was rather embarrassing for the media, as they made an incorrect assumption. They presented they didn't present the facts. They presented something to fit their bias, and they lied basically. And they were also not told that Trayvon, who was the victim, actually did beat up Zimmerman. And actually, in the mugshots, when Zimmerman was in custody, they noticed, and on the call when they responded, they saw there was visual evidence of Zimmerman's face being all beat up. So there was evidence to show that he killed Trayvon in self-defense because he was being attacked, and he seemed to act in self-defense because of that. And eventually, the full true story, less biased story, actually did come out a few months later after this event, from various sources, but there was. The 911 tapes were released, and people could see that the visual proof that Zimmerman was attacked and acted upon his right in self-defense. So that's basically all I got. That was this. I thought this fit media bias. The fact that they did use media bias in a lot of ways. They tweaked it in their descriptions. And they also, they tweaked the photos. They even got the guy's race wrong, which was kind of weird. But so I could tell they were very determined to make the public think that this was a racial crime when it had nothing to do with it. It was just one person acting upon self-defense against somebody who tried to attack him, and it was justifiable. It had nothing to do with race, but the media portrayed it all about a white neighborhood man, a rich white neighborhood man killing a black kid who just wanted to, look out for his, brother, bringing him candy, and so it made up a lot of facts that were not there, and it left out a lot of the truth. So that's why I thought this article best suited media bias. So that's pretty much all I got. Thanks for listening.